So I co-led a women's sexuality workshop several years ago now, like 2018. And a huge topic of conversation in that workshop was, we called it like the mid-no, right? Like the idea of like, if you're flirting and, you know, if maybe foreplay is happening and then suddenly you're not feeling it, like how to do that, right? How to give the mid-no. And something that was so surprising that came out of that conversation in this workshop was the realization that like a lot of women who have sex with men, we've been taught from a very early age that like, if he has an erection, like that's it. Like you have to keep going. Like he's gonna die if you don't follow through. It's gonna be a huge imposition. And I find that's work that actually often comes up with my clients, of even just having to go back to this fundamental of like, your partner's gonna be okay. And that goes for everybody, regardless of what your anatomy is, that like your partner's gonna be okay.
Welcome to the Multiamory podcast. I'm Jace.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Dedeker.
We believe in looking to the future of relationships, not maintaining the status quo of the past.
Whether you're monogamous, polyamorous, swinging, casually dating, or if you just do relationships differently, we see you and we're here for you.
On this episode of the Multiamory podcast, we're tackling one of the most painful and universal relationship challenges, sexual rejection. We're going to explore why a no can feel so personal and how couples can get stuck in a painful pursuer-distancer cycle when one partner feels constantly unwanted and the other feels constantly pressured. We'll dive into the science of desire a little bit and give you some practical, compassionate tools to help give and receive no's more easily, which in turn makes it much easier to say yes. Whether you're in a long-term relationship or you're navigating the dating world, this episode should give you some new frameworks for turning moments of rejection into opportunities for deeper trust and connection. If you're interested in learning about some of our fundamental communication tools that we reference on this show, check out our book, Multiamory: Essential Tools for Modern Relationships, which covers some of our most used communication tools in all types of relationships, many of which are useful in these sorts of situations we're talking about today. And you can find links to buy that at multiamory.com/book or wherever fine books are sold. With that, Emily, Dedeker, have you ever been rejected for sex before?
Yeah, but I think I've done a lot more rejecting in my life than rejection.
Yeah, I've definitely been rejected for sex before. I mean, I'm sorry, like when you pose it like that, it makes me think like I just hit up some random stranger in a bar for sex and did they reject me or not? That's not something I'm doing very often. You mean in the context of an ongoing sexual relationship, yes?
I think that's part of the question here is that for a lot of us, when we think about sexual rejection in the abstract, we think about that, like I've asked a new person to have sex with me and they said no, versus where I think it actually is more likely to show up is with partners that we have ongoing relationships with, where it's that kind of, hey, do you want to, I don't know, I'm not feeling good tonight, or like, I don't know about that. Like that kind of thing probably happens a lot more often in most people's lives over the course of their life than that like hookup rejection. I guess unless you're just a pickup artist and that's what you're doing all the time, I suppose.
Have you ever been rejected for sex ever in your life?
Oh yes, so many times in established relationships as well as new relationships or anything like that. Yeah. Of course. I would bet basically everybody has at some point if they've had a number of sexual relationships, right? If they've had a number of relationships, they've probably experienced this. And something that we hear often is this one of two narratives. Either my partner keeps turning me down for sex and I'm upset about that. I feel bad about that. Or my partner keeps bugging me to have sex and I feel pressure from them and now sex feels like a chore and I don't want to do it. I think also we'll hear about like the anxiety of misreading signals, fear of making a move, something like that in more casual dating. But interestingly, I feel like that version of sexual rejection is at least like we're aware of it and we talk about it a little bit more versus that one within a relationship. There's almost kind of this taboo to bring it up, feeling Like, oh, if I admit that I reject my partner for sex, does that mean I'm a bad partner, or does that mean I don't love them, and vice versa? We're going to talk about both on this episode, but that's definitely something worth noting right up front.
Well, and that creates a lot of resentment, I think, potentially over time, that there are moments where you just get in these cycles, and I'm assuming we're going to talk about that, of somebody being the primary person who asks for sex, the other person rejecting them, and then kind of feeling guilt on both ends and potentially getting to a place where neither person wants to bring it up. Nobody wants to engage necessarily, or they think that if they do, they're constantly going to get rejected.
Boy, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
And I think it can also ebb and flow within a relationship too. Like, I've definitely had relationships where I wouldn't think of that as defining the whole relationship, but where there have maybe been significant periods where it did kind of feel like that, of like, oh, well, we don't want to bring it up or talk about it, but it's a problem, but no one quite knows how to move forward with this.
Can I ask you two a question? Because we have all lived with partners. Do we feel like sex tends to decrease the minute that you start living with a partner, or not always?
It's hard to tell what's from living together and what's from having kind of a more established relationship that you'd be at the point where you'd be more likely to live together. So it's harder to say, because those two tend to go along with each other. Even if you move in while you're still in NRE and you're having a lot of sex, very quickly you're kind of settling into a more established relationship and you might be doing it less. I don't know. Because I do feel like those tend to go hand in hand from my past experience.
Yeah, that's hard to disentangle. I do think that, like, when you're not living with somebody, even if it's still a more established relationship, I think there's something about it almost being a ritual of, like, if you're going over to somebody else's house, right? Like, maybe you're stepping away from your work or stepping away from the obligations at home, that I know for me sometimes helps me to get into a more sexual mindset, right? Versus like when you're living with somebody, sometimes it's kind of like that all is the same space. And especially if you're not like necessarily going out and like having date nights or like creating a container for like sexual play, that I think it can then be hard to shift into that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. There's sort of more of a special occasion around seeing each other if you're not living together. It's like harder to differentiate, like, what's a special sexy night and what's a normal night when you live together.
Well, and I think of that Esther Perel thing of distance creates desire, and that if you're not living with someone, there probably is going to be at least some distance between the two of you for a time within your week, for instance. And therefore the desire or the excitement about, oh, I get to see this person and then maybe make love to them is a little bit higher than it might be if you saw them on a daily basis and you're like, that old chestnut over there.
Yeah. That said, I have also had some longer term relationships where we never lived with each other, but there still was that thing where sex became less a part of that relationship. And it was a struggle, right? It was a bit of a point of contention of kind of who wants it more than the other at a given time, or who feels its absence more acutely than the other. Like, that was definitely a point of contention in that relationship, which was several years long, but we never lived together. And so like, that can happen too. This is definitely not something that's exclusive to people who live together. One thing I wanted to start us with here is looking at that sexual connection and looking at it not just about getting sex, but about the rest of it, right? If it's just about getting off, that's easier to do on your own. It's more convenient for, like, you can figure out what works for you and you can just do that. And so clearly there's something else. There's something special about having a sexual experience with somebody else. And if we look at this first through this lens of the Gottmans, where when they're looking at relationships, they have this concept of turning toward or a bid for connection. And this is a bunch of things, right? This isn't just sex. This is like, oh, I make a little joke, or I try to get your attention about something. These are various little bids for attention. And if you respond by turning toward, that's like engaging with it and receiving it well, and you've increased connection. You've won connection points. And then the opposite is, they try to do that and you kind of reject it or turn against it or find some reason why we shouldn't do that. Like, that kind of feels like a break in connection and you lose some connection points. And so when someone's initiating sex with a partner, that could be thought of as one of these bids for connection, right? It's like, oh, I want to have some kind of connection with you. And then we could look at it as, well, if you're rejecting that, then you're kind of losing some of that connection. You're turning away. But there's also this other lens to look at of when you do, like if someone suggests something, turning toward doesn't always just mean saying yes to it, but it means like responding to it in a positive way. On the other hand, like the way that you receive that person saying, oh, thank you, that's so sweet, but I'm not really feeling it, or I'm really tired. Like the way you receive that is also in turn another chance to turn toward or turn away. And I think that's where we get lost sometimes, is that when the partner says no for whatever reason, or they're tired, or they're just not feeling it, there's like maybe anger or pouting, or kind of like, okay, fine, whatever. And there's sort of this instant feeling of turning away or like disconnecting from the partner. Is this, I see some nods from the two of you. Is this kind of resonating with experiences you've had?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Of course. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that reaction is defensiveness, which is one of the Gottman's four horsemen, right? At the end of a relationship, then basically you're saying like, it's not safe for you to be honest with me. And so now we end up in a problem, right? Where we get to that thing of like, well, I don't want to ask, and you don't want me to ask, and you'll shut me down sooner so that you don't have to say no, or you'll like make it really clear you're not interested so that I don't ask, so that you don't have to say no, right? Like I think that's an example of that cycle we can fall into. And if we're not thinking about the Gottman bid for connection and turning toward, it's really easy to just, for both people, to feel so trapped by that and like not understand what's going on and be really frustrated by it.
So as in the sense that like, I don't know, that's really interesting because I haven't really heard defensiveness described that way of like, it's not safe for you to be honest with me. And it seems like in this particular interaction we're looking at with, you know, like a sexual bid for connection, that could go both ways, right? That like,
yeah,
if you reject in a really harsh way, that tells your partner it's not safe for you to be honest when you're like feeling sexually attracted to me, or when you're feeling like you want to be sexually close to me. And if the person takes that rejection in a poor way, they're also saying it's not safe for you to be honest, that you're not feeling it.
Right. Now that's interesting, because when I was thinking about this, I was thinking more often the kind of like, oh, no, I'm not really feeling it, trying to be a little bit soft about it, or even a little apologetic about it. And then it feeling very personal, though, to the person who got rejected, of like, oh, I essentially like took a risk trying to communicate this to you and wanting to connect with you, and now you've shot me down, and I get defensive. So I feel like more often I've seen that step be the really negative one. But you're right, that also like the way you do that rejection could be part of it.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of people discussing instances with me where their partner says, ugh, no, thank you. Like, I really don't want that right now. Or they do something that shows the partner, wow, this is almost so off-putting to them that they do not want to engage in this with me in any way. Even if that happens a number of times throughout the relationship, like that sticks somehow. We create these sort of narratives and stories over time that maybe that's going to happen again. And I do think that that's where, again, that like resentment can build over time. And if I look at my very long-term relationship, I think on either end, sometimes that was what was occurring. It was this defensiveness. It was this sort of stonewalling. It was this, I've got to get away from this as quickly as possible. And also sort of using sex as a weapon in many ways. That, okay, there's something fundamentally wrong with you or wrong with the relationship because you don't want to do this with me. Or there must be something fundamentally wrong with me because my partner keeps rejecting me, for instance. It creates a really toxic cycle that I know for myself personally. As time went on in my last big relationship, I didn't even want to broach the subject at all. And it became a source of like great discomfort for both me and my partner at the time.
And not broaching the subject, you mean like not even wanting to, like you didn't want to initiate sex either? Or like you didn't want to have a meta conversation around the ways the two of you navigated sex?
I think both. I think my partner got to a point where he was like, you need to be the one to initiate it because I feel like I'm doing it all the time, which I think is fair. But I think also for a number of reasons, I just didn't really want to have it with him anymore. And I think that if you get to that point in a relationship, it can be really hard to come back from that. And like you said, things ebb and flow. I do think that people like Emily Nagoski and various other people out there who are very well versed in this subject specifically, their work is to try to get you back from that place. But at least in that particular relationship, it was not a place that I could come back from easily by any means. And I think to like my relationship now, where I love having sex with this person and like I can say no and he can say no and it's not a problem. And it's just so different and creates such a wonderful container for possibility to be there. And it's just the exact opposite of how my last relationship was.
Well, so this actually is a nice segue into the next thing I wanted to bring up here, which came from this interesting article from Lisa Eliasson, a counselor and sex therapist writing for simplepractice.com. And this is just a quote from her article about this subject that I wanted to read. And she says, "I often ask my clients, do you want your partner to have sex more often, or do you want them to be interested in having sex more often? Doing it and being interested in it are two different things. Most of the time, my clients recognize that the high desire partner isn't looking for duty sex, just sex out of obligation, but rather they want to feel wanted and desired. Sex may be an effort to manage emotional experiences such as lower stress levels, improve self-esteem, validate an identity, and the low desire partner can end up focusing on meeting their partner's needs instead of their own feelings of pleasure. And so sex becomes work instead of play, an obligation for someone else's sexual demand, another item on a to-do list. However, as the higher desire partner grows lonelier, their need for togetherness only increases." And I feel like that's kind of getting at the heart of what you were talking about there, is that cycle then gets worse and worse. Like
Definitely.
the need from that higher need partner goes up as they feel like they're not getting it, and the other partner wants it less or feels more pressure, and it becomes less fun because it feels like an obligation, even if like that wasn't really what either of them intended to go into that interaction with, if you rewind earlier in their relationship, but it can really easily end up there.
Well, and I think that brings up another part of this, which is scheduling sex. And I think a lot of people schedule sex because we lead busy lives, especially if you have children, if you have assets, if you have a lot of obligations. It can be almost like a nice ritual to put on the calendar to be like, okay, like this is our date night. This is when we're going to have sex. But again, if it's that obligation part, then it can feel like a chore. And it can feel like I'm only doing this to check a box and not because I really want it to happen. So I think that there's that kind of like fine line between let's do this so that we can engage with one another and build and foster that togetherness versus I'm just doing this to kind of placate you and to make you feel like, well, at least we did it this week.
Yeah, I guess you could end up in a situation where for both people, it feels more like a to-do list chore. Even if both people in general would like to be having more sex and feeling more connected, you can still end up in a situation where it feels a bit more like a chore.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, we just have to do it. And then it becomes more about doing the thing rather than the result of the thing, which is feeling more connected and all of that. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the ways that sexual desire comes up and understanding that in a way that might help us to navigate this in our relationships before we then get into some practical tools that we can start applying. But first, we're going to take a quick ad break to talk about some sponsors of this show. Thank you to all of our sponsors. And thank you to you for taking a moment to give them a listen. If any seem interesting to you, use our links and promo codes. Check our show description for that. That does help support our show. And of course, if you would rather support us more directly and get access to ad-free episodes released a day early and our amazing private communities, you can go to multiamory.com/join and sign up there. Emily, you brought up earlier Emily Nagoski's way of looking at this as more of an expert. And so I actually did want to talk a little bit about some of her writings from her book, Come As You Are. And one of the things that she talks about in there is this thing of rather than thinking of sexual desire as just you have desire or you don't, that instead there's two systems at play. There's this sexual excitation system, which is like the gas pedal, and there's the sexual inhibition system, which is the brake. And if you push on the gas while also pushing on the brake, you're not going to go anywhere and you're probably going to damage your engine. And if you're not pushing on either of them, like you could take off the brake, but if you're not putting any accelerator on, you're also not going to go anywhere. So you need to do these in coordination with each other. So just to kind of recap a little bit of that from her book, the sexual excitation system is the accelerator. And so that's all of the cues and the contexts in your brain that send that yes signal to say like, yes, I can be aroused. Yes, I can have desire. These are very individual. You know, this could be physical touch. It could be the smell of a partner or of a certain perfume that they have. It could be erotic imagery or feelings of emotional intimacy and safety, anything like that that kind of gets the motor going. But at the same time, we have this sexual inhibition system, which is the brake. And that's all of the stuff that sends our brain the no signal. And so that's things like stress, fatigue, anxiety, body image concerns, maybe performance anxiety, unresolved relationship conflicts, like chores, the fact that the house is dirty and you still need to clean it, anything like that. And so in order for sexual desire to emerge, we can't just push on the gas. We also need to make sure we're letting go of the brake.
Yeah, of course, this lines up with the really popular model of spontaneous desire versus responsive desire. You know, spontaneous desire being a desire for sex that seems to come out of the blue, right? Sometimes it can arise in anticipation of pleasure being on the way. And this is what's most commonly depicted in our media. Sometimes we mistake it as like the better way to experience desire. And then we also tend to associate this with like a male desire response, that we just kind of assume that all men are like either horny all the time or horny at a moment's notice. And therefore, like, it's just going to hit them like a lightning bolt and then they're going to be ready to go, which is painting with a really broad brush.
Yeah.
And then there's responsive desire, which is desire that awakens in response to the presence of pleasure, right? Or arousal that's already occurring. And so you may not feel any desire beforehand, but then once you start to engage, right? Once you start to feel your partner's skin or you start to cuddle or getting close, that then your body is able to wake up and remember that you enjoy this, and then desire emerges out of that, right? And it's also a common pattern. Again, usually we associate it with women, with people in long-term relationships. I will say that, like, I don't find it very helpful to make it so gender binary, honestly, even though, like, yeah, sure, I think we're trends. Some of this is also how we're socialized to deal with our own like natural sexual arousal responses. But I found from working with people, like people from all across the gender spectrum have very different response patterns here. And also sometimes can embody both as well.
Absolutely. I think that where the gender thing really shows up, from my experience, is, you know, in male-female identifying heterosexual partnerships, whatever, however I want to say that, where there's a man and a woman involved, that the kind of social assumptions that we put on one is not about them actually having very much truth to them, but that they add a different kind of pressure. And so one way I've seen this is that if a female partner in a heterosexual relationship feels like she's rejected by her male partner, it can land more personally. Like this, oh, they must think I'm ugly because I've been socialized to think men will sleep with anything that's not completely hideous. And so, right, it's like easier then to go there to this place of taking that extremely personally. And I think sometimes gay men can fall into this same trap, right? Because there's this assumption of like, everyone's down all the time, so I've got to be really ugly if this person doesn't want to have sex with me, right? And I know I'm not that bad, so what's wrong with me? What is it about me? Rather than thinking like maybe they're more responsive desire, or who knows what these other things are going on for them. And then I think similarly, there can be shame around having spontaneous desire as a woman, where it's like you're socialized to think you wouldn't do that. Or there's like this thing of men might hope, oh, well, if I just found someone who did have that spontaneous desire for me, like happens in the movies, that would mean she's really into me. It's more about all this baggage that we put onto those ways of experiencing desire for us or for someone else.
Do we feel as though desire that men and women have changes and has changed with age? Because I would argue, at least for myself, when I was younger, didn't know really what it was that I wanted necessarily and who I was as a sexual being. And now I feel like as I'm older, that has changed, and the opportunity for spontaneous desire is more present, just simply also because I know who I am more. I don't give a shit.
We can hold ourselves back from feeling that desire if we feel like that's wrong of us.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, does that resonate at all for either of you?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's like the clear part of age and just general physical condition, emotional condition, changing that over time. I mean, I feel like compared to my peers, I've always had, I guess I would say, less of a feeling of my sexual interest controlling me than my peers. However, that was still much stronger when I was younger and much less so now. So that's interesting. I think for you, there was different stuff going on that makes it actually like stronger, more spontaneous desire now.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Dedeker, what you've seen with like clients or yourself or anything like that.
Dedeker, do you feel as though you have more potential for spontaneous desire as you've aged? Do you feel like your sex drive has gone up, down? What exactly? Where is it currently, I guess? Because I feel like, if anything, mine's gone up.
Yeah, I think as I've gotten older, more it's connected to just being more familiar with my body, I suppose, and being more in tune with it, or maybe a little bit more sensitive to it, right? Like I think that sexual desire feels a little bit less like a black and white binary to me now, and I'm a little bit more aware of it's like shifting and changing, right? And for me also, a big part of that is really riding the waves of my own menstrual cycle, right? And being really aware of how that influences me on a day-to-day basis.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that the responsive desire thing is something that I've become much more attuned to than I think I used to be. It used to be more like either I'd assume I would have the desire pretty quickly, or I just wouldn't have it at all for this person. And I've definitely come over the last quite a few years, to understand how it's like sometimes like I might not feel like for sure that I want that, but once you kind of get in that situation, you're kissing a little bit or you're touching the skin, like then, oh yeah, okay. No, this is nice. And I feel like that's actually been really nice to understand that there's that way in too, that you don't just have to kick in the front door, that you can also kind of, slide in sideways and kind of find your way to arousal this other way. I do think that's something, to go back to your point, Emily, about scheduling sex and how that can add this feeling of pressure. I think that's especially true if we've scheduled sex and we assume it has to be spontaneous desire that makes sex happen.
Sure.
Because that's hard to do on schedule, right? That's not very spontaneous if you're using the term spontaneous desire literally. That instead it's kind of, I've found that if sex is scheduled, there has to be more of this, okay, like both of us are not quite in the right headspace for this, but let's start to move ourselves in a direction of opening up that possibility, right? Of kind of cuddling a little bit or kissing, or let's just relax a little bit first and then kind of see where that goes, along with the possibility that we might still not. And that's also okay. Like taking rain checks on sex, also, I think, important, so that it doesn't fall into that pressure of like, oh, well, it has to be now. And so now it's not fun. Now it's just checking a box.
Absolutely.
One thing I wanted to hit on before we move on to some of the tools that we've come up with for this is this concept of getting a no from somebody else. And this is something that comes up in a number of different contexts, right? So within kind of the play party consent culture world, there's this idea of, unless I can trust you to say no, I can't trust you to say yes. Like there's that idea of like, I need to know that you're able to say no before I feel like I can get an enthusiastic yes from you. But then in other areas, like in sales, which is where I first encountered this in my like retail job, while I was in beauty school, becoming a hairstylist, in my retail job, reading this book about the power of no. And it was all about this thing of keep asking for more until the person says no, or keep offering more, I guess would be the nicer euphemistic way to say it, until the person says no. The idea being in retail, it's like, well, you don't know that they've bought all that they want to buy until they tell you no. Like that we're not assuming for them, oh, they probably only want to get 2 things. And like, sure, that's all nice in theory, except it leads to this thing of, well, I'm going to keep pushing you. I'm going to keep pushing you until you eventually say no. And then I have this sense of like, that's as far as I could get you. And now that's where we'll stop. And I think we see this also in pickup artistry. This idea of both like, I'm going to keep pushing until I get a no. And then also I'm going to do things to try to make saying no harder, which if we look at the situations we talked about earlier about one person in a couple, wanting sex and then the other person saying no, and then they try to make it difficult for them to stick to that no by feeling upset or being sad or being defensive or whatever, you've actually just made that problem worse. And that I think if we let those kind of cultural ideas from sales or pickup artistry or whatever, even if they were presented in an innocent seeming way, can actually drive us into that cycle more quickly, into that idea of, oh, well, I have to push for a yes as much as I can. That's how I'll get what I want. And ironically, by actually making it much easier for the other person to say no at any point and like building up a trust that they can say no anytime, then it actually makes it much easier for them to say yes. It makes it more comfortable for them to say yes because they know at any point they could say no and that's okay. Versus like you were saying, Emily, where if you have a partner who you feel like just hounds you for this and you don't want to and it feels bad, that it's like you don't even want to flirt with them. You don't even want to kiss them or like hold their hand because they might think that's an invitation that you want sex. And so now you don't want to do that. I know like this is one that Dedeker and I have talked about a lot in talking about relationships and sexual dynamics, where that shift between when do I feel safe to flirt and it doesn't mean I have to have committed myself to having sex right now versus, when that isn't the case.
Well, the thing I always bring up, so I co-led a women's sexuality workshop several years ago now, like 2018. And a huge topic of conversation in that workshop was, we called it like the mid-no, right? Like the idea of like, if you're flirting and, if maybe foreplay is happening and then suddenly you're not feeling it, like how to do that, right? How to give the mid-no. And something that was so surprising that came out of that conversation in this workshop was the realization that like a lot of women who have sex with men, we've been taught from a very early age that like, if he has an erection, like that's it. Like you have to keep going. Like he's going to die if you don't follow through. And you're going to feel like really, really bad. It's going to be a huge imposition. And I find that's work that actually often comes up with my clients, of even just having to go back to this fundamental of like, your partner's going to be okay. And that goes for everybody, regardless of what your anatomy is, that like your partner's going to be okay, right? Like they're not going to die.
No.
If or if you change your mind. If you
stop at any point. Yeah.
Right. Or if you need to adjust at any point, it's going to be okay.
Something that I have found has shifted for me is that in relationships, often I will be the one to be the voice of, oh, it's okay if like, if you're having sex, especially if it's with a newer person, but not necessarily, where it's just like, it's been going, it's good. And now it's kind of like, it feels like it's not quite clicking anymore, or like maybe people are getting tired, or it's just like, this seems like maybe this needs to wrap up. And everyone's just kind of waiting for the ending, of kind of being the one to come in and be like, hey, this is cool. Like, this is a great place to leave it. Like, we can stop here because we have more to look forward to. Like, kind of this idea that we don't have to get every single need met right at this moment forever. And
we don't necessarily have to ejaculate. It's going to be all right.
Right. Or have an orgasm or anything like that, right? That it's like, okay, if that's not in the cards today, we still had a good time. And we can still see this as a positive experience. But I think that thinking is not something we're taught early on. Like, I certainly wasn't taught anything of the sort. Were you?
No, I think most of us are told that you have to go to completion in some way for it to be a positive experience, for it to be worthy of our time, or just something that like the guy or whomever or you are going to look back on and say like, yeah, I had sex with that person and it went well, that it can still go well, or it can still be an experience that you recall and remember and be like, yeah, maybe completion didn't occur, but it doesn't matter. Like you said, we have something to look forward to next time.
Yeah. So we're going to go on to some tools here and some ways to look at these things to have more positive interactions. And we're going to take another quick break first to talk about our sponsors for the show. And of course, if you'd love to join our community, get access to our Discord and Facebook group, as well as things like our video processing groups where you can talk more one-on-one in real time with other people in the group, we would love for you to go to multiamory.com/join and sign up there on our sliding scale. And then in the meantime, take a listen to our sponsors. And if any seem interesting to you, use our links or promo codes and check out our show notes for those links.
So to finish this off, we are going to talk about how we can become a master of the no.
The known-verse.
Yes.
The known.
You can master the
known
no.
universe. The known
There you go.
universe. Yeah, I don't
That
know.
was
We'll have to
beautiful.
workshop that.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. This first tool is called the gracious no. So this is for the person doing the declining. I think I personally could have been better about this in my last relationship, and hopefully I'll use this tool for if I ever do decline, which, I have. It happens
ever
once
decline,
in a while.
ever.
Ever decline sex.
It happens
Ever.
once in a while, not as often as it used to, that's for sure. So step one is to validate / appreciate the bid. So you can say something like, thank you for asking, or I really appreciate you initiating.
Make it your
real.
own, though, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like a therapy textbook.
Sure.
I appreciate your expression of interest in myself and intimacy.
Unless you're doing
with
some
me.
kind of sex robot role play,
There you
Yeah,
go.
that could be fun.
then you can do
Beep,
whatever
boop,
you
beep,
want.
boop. Yes. Step two is to state your reality kindly. You can use I statements and say something like, I'm not really in the right headspace for that tonight. I had a really long day at work. I'm pretty exhausted, and my body, myself, my emotions, they're just not feeling in the sexiest place right now.
Something that I found has been really good in my relationship with Dedeker is that it can often just be as simple as saying, like, my heart really wants to, and I'm also just so tired right now. Or like, I don't feel it, even though like I want to. Like, my mind knows that I would like having sex with you, but I'm just not feeling it. Like, there's different variations, but of kind of this acknowledging both sides of it while still being clear of like, I just don't think I'm feeling it. And like, both of us have taken that route at different times of just like, yeah, I know that in another moment I would love that, and just right now I just can't get myself there.
Step three is to offer an alternative if it's appropriate to do so. In a relationship, you could say something like, but I'd love to cuddle. I'd love to maybe sit on the couch and watch a silly YouTube video with you. When you're dating, maybe you could say something like, I'm not feeling it tonight, but I'd be open to seeing a movie next week. Or even like, but we'll see what happens when I see you on Friday. Something like that.
Right. I think the key there is showing that you still have an interest in connecting with them as a person,
Yeah.
even if this, like, sex is not what you want to do right now. I think that's where we can get stuck in that sense of the rejection is personal. It means like you don't want to connect with me, and so I'm also going to pull away from you to protect myself.
Yeah.
So it's kind of making sure that's not what you're communicating by very literally communicating. But I'm really excited to see you again, and I'm looking forward to more chances for us to fool around or whatever it is, right, in your short or long-term relationships. Unless, of course, you're at a point where you actually just aren't interested in this person anymore, in which case there's something else to do besides just rejecting better and better. It's like, no, you should make a change in the relationship.
Definitely. And sometimes you may just not be interested in general. And so you can just simply say, no, thank you. That's complete. That's sufficient. The other steps that we talked about are for maintaining some connection, if that is, in fact, what you want to do. Now, this is a good note for me and for all y'all out there who love to apologize. If you find yourself really prone to apologizing when saying no, maybe just try to break that habit a little bit. Just test it out. Test the waters.
There's an exercise that I've done in a few different workshops that I've attended and also one that I've hosted in the past, one that we all hosted together, which is just practicing saying no. And so the simple version of that would be everyone who's participating, you get up, you kind of wander around, you find somebody, and then you ask them for a hug is usually how this is done with. Like, oh, is it okay if I hug you? And the game is that person has to say no. Like everyone has to say no to this. And it's so interesting that even in that structure where you know that you're supposed to say no, it's hard to do. Like it feels weird and you feel bad about it. I actually still, years later, feel kind of bad about one person in particular.
No,
that I said no
gosh.
to. I know it's so weird, but and I think that in itself is so illuminating of like, yeah, I could probably still use more practice at getting comfortable with that saying no without needing to apologize or go back later and try to make it up to them or something like that, right? It's a really illuminating exercise. If you've never done it before, I do recommend it. If you've got some friends you can try it with or something, like really, it's a silly little game. The harder version of the game then is you play it and say you're going to go around for a while and do this a few times and be like, of all your interactions, you have to say no at least twice, but you don't always have to say no. I found it's even harder because then you're not just saying no because you have to, but some part of you chose that that's the person you're saying no to. And it's a way to like confront that weird feeling of, I'm having to say no. And a lot of people apologize. And that's a good clue of like, I see I have that tendency. I should be careful with that. And with that, we'll move on to tool number 2, which is the generous initiation, or maybe the gentle initiation could be another way to say that. You could put in whatever G word you want there.
Gargantuan.
Ooh, I like that.
Gregarious.
Okay. Oh, that's fun. So this is about making that bid for connection, for sexual intimacy, in a way that makes no obviously an easy and acceptable answer. And again, that goes like so counter to what we're taught in sales or pickup artistry or like how to meet women or like whatever it is, whatever resource, or just in general, if someone's like learning in business how to get what you want, there's often this short-sightedness to like get the yes now rather than thinking about how do I make sure I build a good, trusting, safe relationship moving forward. I would argue in all relationships, even sales ones, but right now we're just talking about relationships. We want to build that. We want to create that. So we want to make sure it's really easy for them to say no or to offer something else. So one option for that is to present a menu of connection rather than just asking for one thing. And so that's like hey, you're looking really cute tonight. Like, would you be open to some cuddling or maybe kissing or sex if we feel like it? To kind of put those options out there while still expressing that you're into it, you're feeling it, you're vibing. Like what feels good to you right now? Or if this is more of like a dating situation, a newer relationship, then stating it more as a question rather than a demand, or kind of making it clear like that no's okay and that doesn't mean date's over. And that's sort of like, I'm having a great time and, feeling really drawn to you. How are you feeling? Just like start a conversation there. And maybe they're like, oh, wow, me too. Or maybe you get some vibes that they're not feeling it so much. Or like, would you be open to a kiss? And it invites this kind of explicit yes, no, but it also gives them control. And it's doing it in a flirty way where it's not like killing the mood to say like, okay, let's lay out which things we do and don't want to do. It's like, no, let's have an ongoing communication about this. And the big part here is to make it clear that saying yes to one thing doesn't necessarily mean saying yes to more things. And so that's why it is really important to check in along the way. And I think this is the one that people who criticize consent culture will often say like, oh, you're taking all the fun and spontaneousness and romance out of it. And I just think those people have never known someone or never tried being flirty about asking. Because there's a way you can communicate those things both verbally and non-verbally that is flirty, that is cute, it is sexy. It's like, I love that. Like, would you want to kiss a little bit? Or, can we just kind of just hold you for a second? The kind of gauging those things can be flirty and fun.
And the last tool is to respect a no without creating distance. Like I said, like maybe I'd call this like the close no, the closening no.
The closening
I don't know, man.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, it goes along with all the stuff you've already been saying, right? It's this idea that like, if a no happens, whether you're the one giving the no or you're the one receiving the no, that's not the breaking point. where you're suddenly no longer close, right? Or where you pull away from each other, or where you put in more distance. So it's like if you're cuddling and tried to initiate sex, but the person was not into it, that like you stay with them and you keep cuddling, right? And like you make it clear that your affection isn't conditioned on just getting sex, right? And that you do enjoy being close to them and staying close to them. For some people, this can be difficult at first, like especially if you just have a hard time with rejection, or if it's hard to not take it personally, right? That like if you're feeling like a little bit hurt or lonely, that it can feel like you want to sort of retreat and lick your wounds and things like that. But really, I think that like really the closeness needs to be your guiding light here.
I found that for me, this is one that I tried to build up kind of this reaction or this reflex, I guess I could say, where if my partner or the person I'm dating kind of seems like, I don't know, like even a little hesitant, right? To kind of be like, oh no, that's cool. Like kind of to build this reflex right away of, smiling and like, oh, that's completely fine. Even if like part of me is a little disappointed, right? If I'm like, oh, I'm really feeling it. I'm excited about this. But I found that by trying to cultivate that reaction right away, that it also makes it easier for me and makes me less likely to take it personally.
Love that.
It's kind of like in those saying no exercises that I was talking about, that one of the things that I was taught in that exercise is that then when the other person says no, that you respond by saying, thank you for taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And again, it's this similar thing of like creating a reflex or sort of a script that changes it from, oh, you rejected me to, oh, you took care of yourself. And like, yeah, maybe I'm disappointed that I don't get to hug you or whatever it was that you were asking for, but that it's not about you as much. It's like, oh, they're just doing what they need to do. Like, thank you for taking care of yourself. And I found that script too has been super helpful, not just for being more respectful of other people, but also just for my own feelings. Of kind of reminding myself, yeah, this is about them. This isn't actually about me. Maybe they're not interested in me, but that's still a them thing. That's not a me thing, right?
That's great.
Our question of the week this week on our Instagram stories is, what was the best no you've ever received? And that might sound like a weird question, but I'm excited to see what y'all do with it. I definitely have some that were memorable for me, where someone said no in a way that was just so clear but compassionate that I just came away going, wow, okay, that was great. Like I feel clear. I'm not sitting here second guessing it. So I'd love to hear from you about what's the best no you ever received. If you want to talk more about this episode, the best place to share your thoughts with other listeners is in the episode discussion channel in our Discord server, or you can post in our private Facebook group. You can get access to these groups and join our exclusive community by going to multiamory.com/join. In addition, you can share with us publicly on Instagram. Multiamory is created and produced by Emily Matlack, Dedeker Winston, and me, Jace Lindgren. Our production assistants are Rachel Shennewerk and Carson Collins. Our theme song is Forms I Know I Did by Josh and Anand from the Fractal Cave EP. The full transcript is available on this episode's page on multiamory.com.